The auction block stood like a gallows in the heart of Silver Creek, Colorado, 1874. Sophia Montgomery trembled beneath the scorching June sun, her tattered blue dress hanging loosely from her once plump frame, now whittled down by 3 months of near starvation. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the dusty town square as townsfolk gathered to bid on her indenture contract 7 years of servitude to pay off her late father's debts. "What'll you give for this fine young woman? Strong back, educated, can cook and clean." The humiliation burned hotter than the sun on her pale skin as tears threatened to spill from her emerald eyes. $2, someone called from the crowd. "5, shouted another. Sophia kept her gaze fixed on the distant mountains, refusing to look at the faces of those who would purchase her freedom as casually as they might buy cattle. Her father's sudden death had left her with nothing but debts and broken dreams. The bank had seized their small farm weeks ago, and now, at 22, she faced a future of servitude to whoever offered the highest price. $15. The voice came from the back, a gruff bid that silenced the others. "Do I hear 20? The auctioneer looked around eagerly, his mustache twitching in anticipation. $50. Came a new voice, deep and steady. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as they parted to reveal a tall figure approaching the auction block. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to the saddle, his worn leather boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each deliberate step. Sophia finally lowered her gaze to see him, a cowboy with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a storm-tossed sky. A well-worn Stetson cast shadows across features that seemed carved from the very mountains she'd been staring at moments before. $50 going once. The auctioneer called, his voice tinged with excitement at the unexpected sum. $75, challenged the previous bidder, a portly man Sophia recognized as the owner of the saloon at the edge of town. The cowboy didn't flinch. $100, he countered without hesitation, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. The crowd murmured in disbelief. $100 was a small fortune in Silver Creek. 100 going once, going twice. The auctioneer's gavel hovered in the air. Sold, to the gentleman in the back. Relief flooded through Sophia, quickly followed by dread. Who was this man who had purchased her freedom at such a steep price? What would he expect in return? The cowboy approached the platform, reaching into his vest pocket to withdraw a leather pouch. He counted out the money carefully before handing it to the auctioneer. Only then did he turn to Sophia, extending a calloused hand to help her down from the platform. "Name's Blake Callahan," he said simply. "Ranch is half a day's ride from here." Sophia hesitated before placing her trembling hand in his. "Sophia Montgomery," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. A hint of a smile softened his weathered features. "Miss Montgomery, I reckon you've had a rough go of it lately." His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "But where I come from, a person's worth isn't measured by what's in their pockets." He led her away from the auction block toward a sturdy chestnut mare waiting patiently at the hitching post. The crowd dispersed, some with looks of disappointment, others with knowing smirks that made Sophia's skin crawl. "Why?" she asked suddenly, stopping in her tracks. "Why would you pay so much?" Blake adjusted his hat, considering her question. "Because, Miss Montgomery, you may be poor in coin, but I suspect you're rich in all the ways that truly matter." He paused, then added more softly, "And in my eyes, that makes you worth every penny." He helped her mount the horse before swinging up behind her, his presence solid and reassuring at her back. As they rode out of Silver Creek, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in months' hope. The road stretched before them, winding through golden plains that swayed in the afternoon breeze. Sophia sat stiffly, acutely aware of the stranger behind her. His arms encircled her as he held the reins, maintaining a respectful distance despite their necessary proximity. "Mr. Callahan," she ventured after they'd ridden in silence for nearly an hour, "I feel I should know what will be expected of me." His chest rumbled with a low chuckle. "Expected? Just honesty, Miss Montgomery. And maybe help with the cooking. My biscuits could break a man's toe if dropped from a sufficient height." Despite herself, Sophia smiled. "I meant my indenture contract." Blake's voice grew serious. "I don't hold with indenture, Miss Montgomery. That paper's just that paper. Far as I'm concerned, you're free to stay or go as you please." Sophia twisted to look at him in disbelief. "Then why pay for my contract at all?" His gaze met hers steadily. "Because no person should be sold like cattle, regardless of their circumstances." She studied his face, searching for deception but finding none. "I have nowhere else to go," she admitted finally, turning back around. "Then the Rocking Sea Ranch is yours to call home for as long as you wish." They continued riding as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Blake pointed out landmarks along the way, a peculiar rock formation that resembled a sleeping bear, a creek that never ran dry even in the harshest summer, a stand of cottonwoods that marked the halfway point to his ranch. "My father homesteaded this land 15 years ago," he explained. "Came out from Kentucky with nothing but dreams and determination. Built something good before the fever took him 3 years back." "I'm sorry," Sophia said softly, recognizing the familiar pain of loss in his voice. "He'd have liked you," Blake replied simply. "He always said you could tell a person's character by how they faced adversity." As dusk painted the sky in watercolor hues of orange and purple, a structure appeared on the horizon, a sprawling ranch house with a wide porch and smoke curling from the stone chimney. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and in the distance, cattle grazed peacefully. "Welcome to the Rocking Sea," Blake announced as they approached. The front door of the ranch house swung open, and an elderly woman stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her weathered face creased into a smile as she spotted them. "You're late, Blake Callahan," she called. "Supper's near cold." Blake dismounted and reached up to help Sophia down. "Mrs. Abernathy, we have a guest. This is Miss Sophia Montgomery. She'll be staying with us for a while." The old woman's keen eyes assessed Sophia, taking in her worn dress and exhausted appearance. Instead of judgment, Sophia saw only kindness in her gaze. "Well, it's about time we had another woman around here," Mrs. Abernathy declared, coming down the steps. "These menfolk wouldn't know a clean shirt from a dish rag without me. Come inside, child. You look like you could use a hot meal and a warm bath." Sophia found herself ushered into a cozy kitchen filled with the aroma of beef stew and freshly baked bread. "Mrs. Abernathy," Martha, as she insisted on being called, clucked over her thin frame and immediately set about filling a bowl with steaming stew. "Eat up, dear," she encouraged, placing the food before Sophia. "Nothing puts meat on bones like my stew." Blake hung his hat on a peg by the door and washed his hands in the basin before joining them at the table. 2 ranch hands entered shortly after, introducing themselves as Hank and Jim before taking their own seats. The easy camaraderie around the table made Sophia's throat tight with emotion. It had been so long since she'd experienced the simple pleasure of a shared meal in a warm home. She ate slowly, savoring each bite of the delicious stew and the soft, buttery bread. After supper, Martha showed her to a small but clean bedroom at the end of the hallway. "It was Blake's sister's room," she explained, "before she married and moved to Denver." "It's lovely," Sophia said sincerely, running her fingers over the patchwork quilt that covered the bed. "There's a nightgown in the dresser that should fit you well enough until we can get you some proper clothes," Martha continued. "And I've put fresh water in the pitcher," so you can wash up. Left alone, Sophia stood in the middle of the room, overwhelmed by the sudden turn her life had taken. This morning, she had awakened in a jail cell, awaiting auction. Tonight, she had a full stomach and a real bed in a home that felt safe. She moved to the window and gazed out at the star-filled sky. In the distance, she could see Blake's silhouette as he checked on the horses in the corral. What kind of man paid $100 to free a stranger, expecting nothing in return? The next morning, Sophia woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the clatter of activity in the kitchen. She dressed quickly in her old blue dress, embarrassed by its shabby condition but having nothing else to wear. When she entered the kitchen, she found Martha kneading dough at the large wooden table. "Good morning, dear," the older woman greeted her. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in months," Sophia admitted. "Please, let me help you." Martha smiled and gestured to a bowl of apples. "You can peel those for a pie if you're so inclined." Sophia set to work, grateful for the task. As they worked side by side, Martha spoke of the ranch and its history, of Blake's father who had built it from nothing, and of Blake himself who had expanded it into one of the most prosperous spreads in the territory. "That boy works from sunrise to sunset," Martha said with pride in her voice. "Never complains, never shirks. Got his father's determination and his mother's kind heart." "Why isn't he married?" Sophia asked before she could stop herself, then blushed furiously at her boldness. Martha's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Had a sweetheart once about 5 years back. She decided ranch life wasn't for her and left for San Francisco. Broke his heart, but he never speaks of it." The front door opened, and Blake entered, bringing with him the scent of morning air and leather. His eyes found Sophia immediately, and a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Morning, Miss Montgomery. Hope you slept well." "Please call me Sophia," she replied. "And yes, thank you." He nodded, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove. "Sophia, then, I thought perhaps we might ride into town today. Get you some proper clothes and whatever else you might need." Sophia's hand stilled on the apple she was peeling. "I have no money, Mr. Callahan." "Blake," he corrected gently, "and consider it an advance on your wages." "Wages? For helping around the ranch," he explained. "Everyone here earns their keep, including me. We can discuss the particulars over breakfast." After a hearty meal of flapjacks and bacon, Blake outlined what he had in mind. Sophia would help Martha with the cooking and household management, assist with the kitchen garden, and keep the ranch books, a task Blake admitted with a rueful smile was not his strong suit. "My father made sure I could read and cipher," Sophia told him. "I kept the accounts for our farm and helped the neighbors with their correspondence." Blake nodded approvingly. "Then it's settled. We'll start you at $20 a month, plus room and board." Sophia's eyes widened. $20 was a generous wage for a woman in these parts, especially one who had been auctioned for indenture just yesterday. "That's too much," she protested. "It's fair pay for honest work," Blake insisted, rising from the table. "We'll leave for town in an hour. The mercantile should have everything you need." True to his word, an hour later, they were riding toward Silver Creek, this time with Sophia on her own mount, a gentle gray mare named Willow. Blake had insisted she learn to ride properly if she was to live on a ranch. "A woman should be able to come and go as she pleases," he'd said, helping her into the saddle and showing her how to hold the reins. The town looked different in the morning light, less intimidating than it had seemed from the auction block. Still, Sophia couldn't help but shrink slightly as they rode down the main street, painfully aware of the curious glances directed their way. Blake seemed oblivious to the attention as he tied their horses outside the mercantile. "Don't mind them," he said quietly, noticing her discomfort. "Small towns run on gossip, but it dies down eventually. Inside the store, the proprietor, Mr. Jenkins, greeted them with a curious expression. "Mr. Callahan, Miss Montgomery, what can I help you with today?" "Miss Montgomery needs a complete wardrobe," Blake said matter-of-factly. "Whatever ladies require these days." Mr. Jenkins raised his eyebrows but quickly masked his surprise. "Of course, Mrs. Jenkins can assist with that. She's in the back room." Blake nodded toward Sophia. "Take your time. Get whatever you need. I have some business at the bank and the feed store. I'll be back in an hour." Left alone with Mrs. Jenkins, a plump woman with kind eyes, Sophia felt her anxiety ease. The older woman didn't ask questions about Sophia's circumstances, simply said about helping her select practical dresses, undergarments, nightgowns, and a sturdy pair of boots. "You'll want something for Sundays too," Mrs. Jenkins suggested, pulling out a lovely blue dress that brought out the green in Sophia's eyes, "and perhaps a shawl for cooler evenings." By the time Blake returned, Sophia had selected a modest but adequate wardrobe, along with personal items and a few books from the small selection at the back of the store. "Is that all?" Blake asked, surveying the packages. "Nothing frivolous? No ribbons or lace?" Sophia shook her head. "This is more than enough." Blake frowned slightly, then turned to Mrs. Jenkins. "Would you add some hair ribbons and whatever else a young lady might enjoy? And a bottle of that lavender water my sister used to like." Before Sophia could protest, he had paid the bill significantly more than she had anticipated and was arranging for the larger packages to be delivered to the ranch. "You didn't have to do that," she said as they left the store, her cheeks warm with embarrassment. Blake helped her mount Willow before swinging onto his own horse. Every woman deserves something pretty, not just practical. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of hoofbeats soothing Sophia's nerves. The road out of town passed by the small church, where the minister was tending to a plot of flowers beside the white-clapboard building. "Reverend Porter," Blake called in greeting. "Fine day." The minister straightened, shading his eyes against the sun. "Indeed it is, Mr. Callahan." His gaze shifted to Sophia, curiosity evident in his expression. Blake made the introductions, explaining simply that Sophia was now working at the Rocking Sea. If the minister had heard about the auction, he gave no indication, merely welcomed Sophia to the community and invited her to Sunday services. "Will you come?" Blake asked as they continued on their way. "To church on Sunday? I would like that," Sophia replied. "My father was a God-fearing man. We never missed a Sunday service until he fell ill." Blake nodded approvingly. "My father was the same. Said a man's relationship with his maker should take priority over everything else." As they approached the ranch, Sophia found herself studying Blake's profile: the strong jaw, the straight nose, the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than he frowned. There was something solid about him, reliable in a way she had seldom encountered. "Thank you," she said suddenly. He glanced at her, a question in his eyes. "For everything," she clarified. "Not just the clothes or the job, but for—" She struggled to find the right words. "For seeing me as a person worth helping." Blake's expression softened. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Sophia. I've had mine. Seems only right to pass that kindness along." The days fell into a comfortable rhythm at the Rocking Sea. Sophia rose with the sun to help Martha prepare breakfast for the ranch hands. Mornings were spent on household tasks: washing, mending, baking, preserving the bounty from the kitchen garden. Afternoons, she worked on the ranch accounts, bringing order to Blake's haphazard record-keeping. To her surprise, she discovered the ranch was even more prosperous than she had initially thought. Blake ran a tight operation with 50 head of prime cattle, several quality horses he bred and trained himself, and enough fertile land to grow hay and feed for the animals with some left over to sell. "You're quite the businessman," she remarked one evening as they sat on the porch after supper, going over the quarterly figures. "These profits are impressive." Blake looked almost embarrassed by the praise. "Just trying to build something that lasts," he said, gazing out at the land spread before them, painted gold by the setting sun. "Something to pass on someday." The implication that he thought of children, of a future family, sent an unexpected flutter through Sophia's chest. She quickly changed the subject, pointing out a discrepancy in the feed costs that needed addressing. As June gave way to July, Sophia found herself increasingly at home on the ranch. Her skin tanned from working in the garden, and her frame filled out thanks to Martha's hearty cooking. The nightmares that had plagued her since her father's death, dreams of destitution and despair, came less frequently. And always there was Blake. He treated her with a respect that bordered on reverence, never pushing, never demanding, but always present. She caught him watching her sometimes, when he thought she wouldn't notice, a gaze so tender it made her breath catch. One Saturday afternoon, as she hung laundry on the line behind the house, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw Blake returning from checking the north pasture, his horse kicking up dust in the golden light. He dismounted in one fluid motion, removing his hat and wiping his brow with his sleeve. His shirt clung to his broad shoulders, damp with sweat from the day's work. "Need a hand?" he asked, reaching for a wet sheet. Sophia smiled, handing him a clothespin. "I thought cowboys didn't do laundry." "This cowboy does whatever needs doing," he replied with a grin that transformed his usually serious face. They worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing as they hung the clean clothes. Each touch sent warmth spiraling through Sophia, a feeling both frightening and exhilarating. "There's a social at the church next Saturday," Blake said casually as they finished. "Dancing, food, the usual community gathering. Would you like to go?" Sophia paused, a pillowcase half hung on the line. "With you? Well, I reckon we'd all go together, Martha, Hank, Jim, and us," he clarified, though a hint of color touched his cheekbones. "But yes, with me." She nodded, not trusting her voice. The thought of an evening of dancing, of Blake's arms around her, even in the formal setting of a church social, made her heart race. The social turned out to be a lively affair, with nearly everyone from Silver Creek and the surrounding homesteads in attendance. The church had been transformed, pews pushed back to create a dance floor, tables laden with food brought by the congregation's women. Sophia wore her blue Sunday dress, with a ribbon Martha had helped her weave through her honey-colored hair. As they entered the church, she felt eyes turned toward them, whispers following in their wake. "Is that the auctioned girl? Heard Callahan paid $100 for her. Wonder what kind of arrangement they have." Blake's hand came to rest at the small of her back, a protective gesture that silenced the most obvious gossips. "Don't pay them any mind," he murmured close to her ear. "People will always talk." The evening progressed pleasantly despite the initial discomfort. Martha was quickly surrounded by her friends, while Hank and Jim found partners among the unmarried women of the community. Blake stayed close to Sophia, bringing her punch and introducing her to neighbors who hadn't yet made her acquaintance. When the fiddle player struck up a lively reel, Blake held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Montgomery?" She placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her onto the floor. "I should warn you, I'm not very practiced," she admitted. His smile was reassuring. "Just follow my lead." To her surprise, Blake was an excellent dancer, guiding her through the steps with confidence. His hand at her waist was firm but gentle, his movements sure as they whirled among the other couples. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked, breathless from the pace. "My mother insisted," he replied, expertly spinning her under his arm. Said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a bull in a china shop. Sophia laughed, the sound bright and genuine. It struck her suddenly that she couldn't remember the last time she had laughed like this freely, without the weight of worry pressing down on her. As the evening wore on, the music slowed. Blake's arms encircled her waist, holding her closer than was strictly proper for a church social. Sophia knew she should step back, maintain a respectable distance, but she couldn't bring herself to move away from the warmth of his embrace. "You're the talk of the room tonight," he said softly, his breath stirring the hair near her temple. "Every man here is wondering how I got so lucky." Sophia's cheeks warmed at the compliment. "I think they're wondering what kind of arrangement we have," she corrected gently. "I heard the whispers." Blake's jaw tightened. "People always assume the worst." "And what is the truth, Blake?" she asked, suddenly needing to know. "What am I to you?" His steps faltered slightly, and his stormy eyes searched hers. "You're—" He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "You're someone I admire greatly, Sophia. Someone I respect too much to answer that question fully in a crowded room." Before she could respond, the music ended, and Reverend Porter approached them, his wife at his side. "Mr. Callahan, Miss Montgomery," the minister greeted them warmly. "We're so pleased you could join us tonight." The moment for honesty had passed, but Sophia felt its promise lingering between them as they made polite conversation with the Reverend and his wife. The ride home was quiet, the wagon creaking beneath them as they traveled under a canopy of stars. Martha had fallen asleep against Hank's shoulder in the back, while Jim rode ahead on horseback to check the road. "Did you enjoy yourself tonight?" Blake asked, his voice low so as not to disturb Martha. Sophia nodded, drawing her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "More than I expected to." "Even with the gossip?" "Even so." She hesitated, then added, "It's strange how quickly life can change. A month ago, I stood on that auction block, believing my life was over. And now, Blake prompted when she didn't continue. Sophia looked up at the vast expanse of stars above them. "Now I feel as though it might just be beginning." Blake's hand found hers in the darkness, his calloused fingers intertwining with her smaller ones. He didn't speak, but the gesture said what words could not, that he felt it too, this new beginning taking shape between them. The following week brought a heat wave that settled over the valley like a wool blanket. The creek that ran through the rocking sea property dwindled to a trickle, and the cattle sought what shade they could find under the sparse trees in the pasture. Sophia worked in the kitchen garden in the early mornings before the sun grew too intense, harvesting tomatoes and beans for Martha to can for the winter. The afternoons were too hot for much activity, the air inside the ranch house still and heavy despite the windows thrown open to catch any hint of breeze. One particularly sweltering afternoon, Sophia sat on the porch, ledger books open beside her but largely ignored as she fanned herself with a folded newspaper. The sound of approaching riders drew her attention to the road, where Blake and Jim appeared, returning from checking on a break in the fence line on the property's western boundary. They rode into the yard, dust clinging to their clothes and skin, their horses lathered with sweat. Blake dismounted, removing his hat to wipe his forehead with his bandana. "This heat's going to be the death of me," he declared, climbing the porch steps to join Sophia. "Even the lizards are looking for shade." Sophia smiled sympathetically. "Martha made lemonade. It's in the kitchen." Blake disappeared inside, returning moments later with 2 glasses of the cool drink. He handed one to Sophia before settling into the chair beside her. "Jim says there's a swimming hole about a mile upstream," he said after taking a long drink. "Says the water's still deep enough for a decent swim, even with the drought." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting we go swimming, Mr. Callahan? A hint of mischief gleamed in his eyes. I'm suggesting we escape this infernal heat before we both melt like candles. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Martha's visiting her sister in town until tomorrow. Hank and Jim are heading to the south pasture after they rest the horses. Just the two of us? Sophia clarified, her heart beating a little faster at the thought. Just the two of us, Blake confirmed. Unless you find the idea improper. Sophia considered for a moment. It was improper by any social standard. An unmarried woman and man, alone at a swimming hole, it was the sort of thing that started rumors. Then again, there were already rumors aplenty about her and Blake. I don't have a bathing costume, she pointed out practically. Blake's smile widened. You can wear one of my old shirts over your undergarments. No one will see you but the fish and maybe a curious squirrel or two. The idea of cool water against her skin was too tempting to resist. Very well, Mr. Callahan. Lead the way. An hour later, they rowed along the creek bed, following it upstream to where it widened into a natural pool, shaded by towering cottonwoods. The water was clear and invitingly cool, a small waterfall at the far end creating gentle ripples across the surface. Blake helped Sophia dismount, then busied himself securing the horses to a nearby tree. I'll just go around that bend while you change, he said, gesturing to a curve in the creek a short distance away. Call when you're ready. Alone, Sophia quickly removed her dress, leaving on her chemise and drawers before pulling on the oversized shirt Blake had brought for her. The cotton fell to mid-thigh, preserving her modesty while still allowing for movement. I'm ready, she called, suddenly shy despite the coverage. Blake reappeared, now wearing only his trousers rolled up to the knee. His chest was bare, bronzed from the sun and muscled from years of ranch work. Sophia felt her cheeks heat at the sight, and she quickly looked away. Ladies first, he offered, gesturing toward the water. Sophia waded in cautiously, gasping as the cool water rose past her knees. It's freezing, Blake laughed, following her in. Only at first. Your body will adjust. He was right. After the initial shock, the water felt heavenly against her overheated skin. Sophia ventured deeper until the water reached her waist, then her shoulders. With a deep breath, she ducked under completely, emerging with a delighted laugh as water streamed from her hair. Blake watched her, an expression of undisguised admiration on his face. You look like a water nymph, he said softly. Self-conscious but pleased, Sophia splashed water in his direction. And you look like you're not nearly wet enough. His eyes widened in mock outrage. Is that a challenge, Miss Montgomery? What followed was a spirited water fight, their laughter echoing off the canyon walls as they splashed and ducked away from each other's attacks. Sophia couldn't remember the last time she had played so freely, without worry or constraint. Eventually, breathless and thoroughly soaked, they called a truce. Blake floated on his back, staring up at the patches of blue sky visible through the tree canopy. My father used to bring me here when I was a boy, he said, his voice soft with memory. Said every man needed a place to wash away his troubles. Sophia tread water beside him. And does it work? He turned his head to look at her. His wet hair slicked back from his forehead, making his features appear even more striking. It does today. There was something in his gaze that made Sophia's breath catch a hunger, carefully controlled but unmistakable. He swam closer, until they were treading water face to face, close enough that she could see droplets clinging to his eyelashes. Sophia, he began, his voice rough with emotion. I need to tell you something. But whatever he intended to say was interrupted by a distant rumble. Blake's expression changed instantly from tenderness to concern. Thunder, he said, glancing at the sky. We need to go. Flash floods are common in these parts when it rains upstream. They hurried from the water, Blake gallantly turning his back while Sophia changed back into her dress, not bothering to fully dry off in their haste. The distant rumble grew louder as they mounted their horses and started back toward the ranch. They were halfway home when the sky opened above them, rain falling in sheets that reduced visibility to mere feet. Blake led them to a line shack, a small, one-room structure used by ranch hands during roundup just as lightning split the sky overhead. Inside, the shack was sparse but dry, containing a small stove, a narrow cot, and a rough-hewn table with a single chair. Blake immediately set about starting a fire in the stove to ward off the chill that came with the rain. "We'll wait it out here," he said, gesturing for Sophia to sit on the cot. "These summer storms usually pass quickly." Sophia nodded, suddenly very aware of their isolation and her sodden appearance. Her dress clung to her form, and her hair hung in wet ropes down her back. Blake didn't look much better, his shirt plastered to his chest, water dripping from his hat brim as he removed it. "You're shivering," he observed, concern etched on his features. "Here." He shrugged out of his vest and draped it around her shoulders. Though damp, it still carried his warmth and scent: leather, horses, and something distinctly Blake. "Thank you," she murmured, pulling it tighter around herself. The small stove soon radiated heat, filling the tiny space with warmth. Outside, rain continued to fall, drumming on the roof with hypnotic intensity. Blake pulled the chair close to the cot and sat facing Sophia. "What were you going to tell me?" she asked. "Before the thunder." Blake's eyes, illuminated by the glow from the stove, studied her face as if memorizing every detail. "I was going to tell you that I've never met anyone like you, Sophia Montgomery." Her heart quickened at his words, at the raw honesty in his voice. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you've faced more hardship than most people see in a lifetime, yet you carry yourself with such dignity. You work hard without complaint, you're kind to everyone you meet, and you have a strength that amazes me daily." He paused, reaching out to tuck a damp strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I mean that when I saw you on that auction block, something inside me knew I couldn't let anyone else have you." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "Blake, I know it's too soon," he continued quickly. "I know you're still finding your footing. I don't expect anything from you, Sophia. I just needed you to know how I feel." The tenderness in his expression made her heart ache with a sweetness she had almost forgotten was possible. In that moment, the barriers she had carefully constructed around her heart since her father's death began to crumble. "It's not too soon," she whispered, surprising herself with her boldness. "Not when it feels so right." Blake's eyes darkened, and he leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Sophia remained still, her gaze locked with his until his lips finally met hers in a kiss so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. His hand cradled her face as if she were made of porcelain, his touch reverent and careful. When he pulled back, his expression was one of wonder. "I never expected to find you," he said softly. "Never thought I'd feel this way again after Catherine left." "Martha told me about her," Sophia admitted. "She said you were heartbroken." Blake nodded, his thumb tracing the curve of Sophia's cheek. "I was. But now I'm grateful she left. If she hadn't, I might never have known what it is to truly love someone." The word hung between them, powerful and transformative. Love. Was that what this feeling was, this sense of coming home, of finding a place where she belonged? "I don't have much to offer you," Sophia said, vulnerability making her voice tremble. "No dowry, no family connections. Just myself." Blake's smile was tender as he took her hands in his. "You're rich in all the ways that matter, Sophia. Rich in courage, in kindness, in strength. And in my eyes, that makes you the wealthiest woman in Colorado territory. Outside, the rain began to ease, sunlight breaking through the clouds to cast golden beams through the small window of the line shack. But neither Blake nor Sophia noticed, too lost in each other's gaze, in the promise of what might be. By August, Sophia's position at the rocking sea had evolved into something undefined yet precious. Blake courted her openly now, bringing her wildflowers he found on the range, taking her for rides to show her beautiful spots on the property, and sitting beside her on the porch swing in the evenings while Martha pretended not to notice their intertwined hands. The gossip in town had shifted from scandalous speculation to romantic interest. A proper courtship. The ladies at church nodded approvingly, especially after Blake began escorting Sophia to Sunday services, his attention to her evident for all to see. One evening in late August, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Blake turned to Sophia with an unusually serious expression. "I've been thinking," he began, his fingers playing with hers. "Harvest will be upon us soon, and then winter." Sophia nodded, wondering at his solemn tone. "Yes, Martha and I have been preparing. The root cellar is nearly full, and we've put up enough preserves to last until spring." Blake smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's not what I meant, though I appreciate your foresight." He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Sophia, I don't want to face another winter wondering where we stand. I don't want to introduce you as my employee or my friend when you're so much more." Her heart began to race as she realized where this conversation was heading. "What are you saying, Blake?" He shifted to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I'm saying that I love you, Sophia Montgomery. I've loved you since I saw you standing on that auction block, proud despite your circumstances. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you hum when you work in the garden and the way you frown when you're concentrating on the ledgers." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as Blake continued, his voice growing more confident with each word. "I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you in my arms every night. I want to raise children with you, grow old with you, face whatever comes our way together." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Sophia Montgomery, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box to reveal a ring, a delicate gold band set with a small but perfect diamond that caught the last rays of the setting sun. "It was my mother's," he explained, his voice husky with emotion. "My father gave it to me before he died. Said I should save it for the woman who captured my heart completely." Sophia stared at the ring, then at Blake's hopeful face, her vision blurred by tears. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Blake Callahan, I will marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. Blake cupped her face and kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and promise into the embrace. They were still locked in each other's arms when Martha opened the front door, took one look at them, and exclaimed, "Well, it's about time." They broke apart, laughing, as Martha hurried forward to examine the ring and offer her congratulations. She bustled back inside, declaring that such an occasion called for her special blackberry cordial, leaving the newly engaged couple alone once more. "Are you happy?" Blake asked, his forehead resting against Sophia's. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. The wedding took place in early October, when the aspen trees had turned to gold and the first hint of winter hung in the crisp air. The ceremony was held in the Silver Creek Church, now filled with friends and neighbors who had come to witness the union of Blake Callahan and Sophia Montgomery. Sophia wore a cream-colored dress that Martha and Mrs. Jenkins had helped her make, with lace at the collar and cuffs and tiny pearl buttons down the back. Her honey-colored hair was arranged in an elegant knot, adorned with small white flowers from the last blooms in the garden. Blake waited for her at the altar, more handsome than she had ever seen him in a new black suit, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. The love in his eyes as she walked toward him on Hank's arm, the ranch hand having proudly accepted the honor of giving her away, made her heart swell with joy. Reverend Porter performed the ceremony, speaking of love's endurance through hardship, of partnerships built on respect and admiration, of homes founded on faith and commitment. When Blake recited his vows, his voice was steady and sure. I, Blake Callahan, take thee, Sophia Montgomery, to be my lawfully wedded wife. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Sophia's voice trembled slightly as she repeated the sacred words, overcome by the journey that had brought her to this moment from destitution to abundance, from despair to hope, from loneliness to love. When Reverend Porter pronounced them husband and wife, Blake's kiss was tender yet possessive, a promise of the life they would build together. The church erupted in cheers and applause as they turned to face their community as Mr. and Mrs. Callahan. The celebration afterward was held at the Rocking Sea, the ranch house and yard transformed with lanterns, bunting, and tables laden with food contributed by every family in attendance. A fiddle player and banjo picker provided music for dancing, and the merriment continued well into the night. As darkness fell, Blake led Sophia away from the festivities to a quiet spot beneath an ancient oak tree. From this vantage point, they could see their home illuminated by lantern light, filled with the sounds of laughter and music. Happy, Mrs. Callahan? Blake asked, his arms encircling her waist from behind. Sophia leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid warmth of him. Beyond words, he kissed the curve where her neck met her shoulder, sending a pleasant shiver through her. I have something to show you, he murmured. Taking her hand, he led her around the main house to a small cottage she had noticed Blake and the ranch hands working on over the past weeks. She had assumed it was additional housing for workers during the busy seasons. Blake opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Inside, Sophia found a cozy living space with a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture, and a small kitchen area. A door at the back presumably led to a bedroom. What is this? She asked, turning to Blake in confusion. Our home, he explained, his expression slightly anxious. I know we could live in the main house, but I thought you might prefer something that's just ours. Somewhere private, but still close enough to help Martha with the running of things. Sophia's heart swelled at his thoughtfulness. You built this for me? For us? He corrected, taking her hands in his. A place to begin our life together. Do you like it? In answer, Sophia wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him deeply. I love it, she whispered against his lips. I love you. Blake's arms tightened around her, his response more physical than verbal as he lifted her easily, carrying her through the doorway into their new home, their new life. The years that followed were not without challenges. The winter of '76 brought blizzards that threatened the cattle herds. A drought in '77 reduced the hay yield, forcing Blake to buy feed at premium prices. But through it all, the Callahans faced each obstacle together, their partnership growing stronger with each trial overcome. In the spring of 1878, Sophia gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Elizabeth Martha Callahan, after Blake's mother and the woman who had become like a mother to Sophia. Little Beth, as they called her, had her father's stormy eyes and her mother's honey-colored hair, a perfect blend of them both. 2 years later, twins joined the family, William Blake and James Henry, named for Blake's father and their loyal ranch hand who had tragically been lost in a flash flood the previous year. The boys were identical in appearance but opposite in temperament. Will quiet and thoughtful like his father, Jim boisterous and adventurous. By 1885, the rocking sea had expanded to twice its original size, with Blake purchasing adjacent properties as they became available. The original cottage had been enlarged to accommodate their growing family, though it maintained its cozy charm. Martha still lived in the main house, now with the assistance of a young woman from town who helped with the household duties, allowing Martha to focus on spoiling her grandchildren, as she called the Callahan brood. On a warm June evening, 11 years to the day since Blake had purchased Sophia's indenture contract, they sat on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard. Beth, now 7, read a book on a blanket spread beneath the oak tree, occasionally looking up to check on her 4-year-old brothers, who were engaged in an elaborate game involving stick horses and imaginary outlaws. "Do you ever think about that day?" Sophia asked, her head resting on Blake's shoulder as they gently swayed on the porch swing. "The auction?" Blake's arm tightened around her. "Sometimes. Mostly I think about how close I came to missing it entirely. I wasn't even supposed to be in town that day." This was news to Sophia. "You weren't." He shook his head. "I was on my way to Denver to look at a new bull. Stopped in Silver Creek for supplies and heard about the auction from Jenkins at the Mercantile." His voice grew softer. "Something made me go. Call it fate or divine intervention. But something told me I needed to be there." Sophia considered this revelation, this narrow thread of chance that had brought them together. "What would have happened to me if you hadn't come?" Blake was quiet for a moment. "I don't like to think about it. But I know this: wherever you ended up, you would have survived. You're the strongest person I know, Sophia Callahan." She smiled at the use of her married name, still feeling a thrill after all these years. "Perhaps. But I'm glad I didn't have to find out." "Mama, Papa, look," Beth called from the yard, where she now stood with her brothers. She pointed to the west, where the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of pink, orange, and gold. Blake stood, offering his hand to Sophia. Together they walked to their children, Blake lifting the twins while Sophia put her arm around Beth's shoulders. As a family, they watched the sun sink behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the land that had given them so much. "It's beautiful," Beth sighed, leaning against her mother. "Yes," Blake agreed, but his eyes were not on the sunset but on Sophia's face, still as beautiful to him as the day he had first seen her. The most beautiful sight in all of Colorado. Later that night, after the children were tucked into bed with stories and kisses, Blake and Sophia sat before the fireplace in their bedroom, sharing a glass of wine to mark the anniversary. "I have something for you," Blake said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet pouch and placed it in Sophia's palm. Inside, she found a delicate gold locket. Opening it, she discovered a tiny portrait of their family on one side: Blake, herself, and the 3 children, painted by a traveling artist who had visited Silver Creek the previous month. "It's perfect," she breathed, tracing the miniature faces with her fingertip. "Look at the inscription," Blake urged. Sophia turned the locket over to find words engraved on the back. "You're rich in my love." Tears filled her eyes as she recognized the echo of his words from that first day, when he had paid $100 to free a woman with nothing to her name. "I meant it then," Blake said softly, taking her hands in his. "And I mean it now. You've made me richer than I ever dreamed possible, Sophia." She leaned forward to kiss him, this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "And you've shown me that true wealth has nothing to do with money," she whispered against his lips. "It's measured in moments like these, in the family we've built, in the love we share." Blake drew her closer, his arms encircling her as they had countless times over the years. Outside, the stars shone down on the rocking sea, on the land that had witnessed their journey from strangers to lovers to partners to parents. Within the walls of the home they had built together, two hearts beat as one, rich beyond measure in the currency that truly mattered, love. And in the years that followed, as their children grew and the rocking sea prospered, Blake and Sophia Callahan remained a living testament to the truth that sometimes the greatest fortunes are found not in gold or silver, but in the treasure of a heart given freely and a love that endures through all seasons.